My daughter looked at me across my own kitchen table at 6:50 on a Tuesday evening and said, "Your money is useless now, Dad." She had no idea I'd signed the house over to my nurse 3 weeks earlier. Welcome to the channel. If you've watched one of these before, you know how they go. Settle in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, this one earns it. My name is Arthur Reyes. I'm 71 years old, spent 34 years teaching high school history at Jeffersonville before I retired in 2019, and for most of my life I thought I understood exactly who my daughter was. I was wrong about that. It took a stroke, a nurse named Priya, and one sentence at my own kitchen table to finally show me the truth. Let me back up to November 3rd, a Sunday morning, the day everything actually started. I was alone in the house on Ashford Lane, the same house my late wife, Marion, and I bought in 1987 for $94,000. Back when that number sounded enormous, the house where we'd raised our daughter, Vanessa, and where Marion had passed 6 years earlier in the bedroom upstairs. I was making coffee at 8:15 that morning when the left side of my face went numb and the mug slipped out of my hand before I even understood what was happening. I don't remember calling 911. I remember the paramedics telling me later I'd managed to dial it myself, slurred but coherent enough to give my address, and I remember the strange, distant calm of lying on my own kitchen floor, listening to sirens, getting closer, wondering if Marion's rose bushes outside the window would still be blooming the next time I saw them. The stroke left me with weakness down my left side and a recovery timeline the doctors described carefully as measured in months, not weeks. I spent 11 days in the hospital. Aina Sag visited twice. Both times she checked her phone more than she looked at me. The first visit, for days in, she stood in the doorway for a long moment before coming all the way inside like she was bracing herself for something worse than what she found. "You look better than I expected," she said, which I chose to take as a compliment rather than examine too closely. "Dad, the doctors say what exactly? Recovery? Months, not weeks?" "Months," she repeated, and something calculating passed behind her eyes that I didn't have the energy to name yet. "Dad, you're going to need real help when you get home," she said on the second visit 4 days later, standing near the window instead of the bed. "Mark and I have been talking. There are some very nice assisted living places near us. Sunrise Meadows has an opening." "I have a house," I said. "I'd like to go home to it." "That house is a liability now, Dad." Stares. "A yard you can't maintain. It's not practical." She said the word practical the way you'd describe a spreadsheet, not a life. "We should really talk about listing it before winter." I didn't argue that day. I didn't have the strength to honestly, and some small tired part of me wondered if she might be right. If you've ever had a family member start talking about your life in terms of what's practical the moment you got weak enough to need help, you already know exactly where this story is going. Tell me in the comments if that's happened to you. I read every one of them. I came home on November 14th to a house Vanessa had already arranged home health care, for which, to her credit, she had actually handled efficiently. That's how I met Priya Akari. Priya was 36, a licensed home health aide, with 11 years of experience, assigned to me 3 mornings a week at first, then 5 once my care needs became clearer. She was blunt in a way. I liked immediately the kind of person who told you exactly what your blood pressure reading meant instead of softening. And who didn't flinch when I struggled with a shirt button, who simply helped and moved on without making it a moment. "You're stubborn," she told me on her second visit, watching me try to manage the stairs myself against every piece of advice from the hospital. "That's going to make this recovery faster or slower, depending on which direction you point it."
Which direction would you point it?
I asked. "Toward getting your hand strong enough to hold a coffee mug without dropping it again," she said. "That's the direction that actually matters to you. Yeah, I can see it on your face every morning." She was right. It did matter to me more than the stairs, more than the house, that small, stupid dignity of holding my own coffee mug again. There was a morning in December, a Thursday, when my left hand cramped up so badly during physical therapy. Exercises that I threw the resistance band across the room in frustration. Priya didn't scold me. She just picked the band up off the floor, handed it back, and said again, 10 more. Then you can be angry about it over coffee." I did the 10. Anger passed somewhere around rep 6. Over the following months, Priya became something closer to family than the home health aide job description technically required. She noticed things. She remembered that I took my coffee black, except on Sundays, when I liked a little cream because that had been Marion's habit, and some part of me still honored it without fully understanding why. She brought me a crossword book from the pharmacy on a Tuesday in December without me ever mentioning. I liked them just because she'd noticed me staring too long at an empty side table. Vanessa, meanwhile, visited on a schedule that thinned out as the months went on. Once a week became once every 2 weeks became, by February, a phone call that lasted 4 minutes and covered exactly 2 topics: my physical therapy progress and whether I'd thought more about Sunrise Meadows. On March 2nd, on Monday, she called with a different topic entirely. "Dad, I need to ask you something," she said. "Mark's business needs a bridge loan. $12,000 just to cover payroll until a contract clears. I know you've got savings sitting there doing nothing." I thought maybe I can help, I said, and I meant it. Whatever had shifted between us, she was still my daughter, and $12,000 was something I could genuinely spare. Really? Something in her voice brightened for the first time in months. "Really? Come by Tuesday, we'll sort out the transfer." I want you to remember that offer, because 48 hours later, everything about how she saw that money changed completely. She came by on Tuesday evening, March 3rd at 6:50, the way we'd agreed. Except she didn't come alone. Mark was in the car, and when Vanessa walked in, her face had a different shape to it than the one from the phone call. Tighter, more rehearsed. "Dad, before we talk about the loan," she said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table, "Mark and I spoke to a financial advisor about your situation." "My situation," I repeated. "Your recovery isn't going the way everyone hoped. If something happens to you, if you need long-term care, the state's going to want to know why a healthy asset like this house is just sitting here instead of being used properly." "Used properly," I said again, hearing the shape of the sentence for what it actually was. "We think it's time to talk about power of attorney," she said, "just to protect things." I sat with that for a moment, watching my daughter discuss my own mind's future capacity, like she was reviewing a lease agreement. "And the loan?" I asked quietly. Something flickered across her face, brief and cold. "Dad, be honest with yourself for a second. What are you even going to do with that money sitting in an account? You can barely make it up your own stairs some mornings. Your money's useless now, Dad. It should be doing something for this family, instead of just sitting here waiting for you to need a nursing home." The kitchen went very quiet, not the comfortable kind of quiet. The kind that arrives right after someone says something true about themselves without meaning to. "Useless," I said. "You know what I mean?" "I don't think I do, actually." "Say it again, slower, so I understand exactly what you mean." She hesitated, hearing herself for the first time, maybe. "I just mean, practically speaking, Dad, money sitting in a savings account isn't helping anyone. It should be working. For the family. For the family, not for me." Not even once in that entire sentence was I included in the family she meant. I want to ask you something watching this. Has anyone in your own life ever used the word family to mean everyone except you? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and I promise you, this story only gets sharper from here. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Told her I needed to think about the loan, and she left 20 minutes later with Mark waiting in the car, looking like a woman who'd made her point and expected results. I watched from the window as she got into the passenger seat. Mark said something to her, and she shook her head, and the car sat in the driveway for almost a full minute before it finally pulled away, headlights sweeping across my kitchen wall like they were erasing something on their way out. She had no idea I'd already made mine. Because here's the part Vanessa didn't know, sitting at that kitchen table on March 3rd. 3 weeks earlier, on February 10th, I'd already met twice with an estate attorney named Diane Okonkwo, recommended by my old friend from the school district. "Mr. Reyes, I want to be very direct with you," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "What you're describing invites scrutiny. If your daughter contests it later, the strength of your case depends entirely on how carefully we document your capacity and your reasoning right now." "Then let's document it carefully," I said. "I'll need a full neurological evaluation first. Independent, unprompted by anyone. I'll need you to write in your own words your reasoning, not for me, for the record, in case anyone ever asks why. I'll need Mizukari to have no knowledge of this until after it's finalized, to remove any argument of influence on her part. She'll refuse it if she finds out too early," I said. "She already thinks she's overstepping just by bringing me a crossword book. Then we'll make sure she finds out at the right time, not the wrong one," Ms. Okonkwo said. I'd had that evaluation done by my neurologist, Dr. Whitfield, unprompted by anyone documenting in writing that I was of sound mind, fully capable of making my own financial decisions, stroke or no stroke. On February 24th, I signed the deed to the house on Ashford Lane over to Priya Akari in trust, with a life estate reserved for myself for as long as I needed it. I would live there fully for the rest of my life. But the house itself on paper already belonged to the one person who had shown up consistently without once mentioning my money. I hadn't told Priya beforehand. I told her the same week I signed it, sitting in my living room, the paperwork still in a manila folder on the coffee table between us. "Arthur, I can't accept this," she said, setting down the folder like it had burned her hand. "This is your daughter's inheritance. I'm your nurse. You spent 5 months treating me like a person instead of a liability," I told her. "That's not a service I owed anyone. I spent 5 months watching my own daughter calculate what I'm worth in a spreadsheet. I know exactly which one of you actually showed up. Arthur, please. Think about this. I have thought about it, more carefully than almost anything in my life. I had a lawyer. I had a neurologist confirm in writing that my mind is exactly as sound as it was before the stroke. The deed is done, Priya. If you want to argue with someone about it, argue with me. I've made my decision. I took this job because I'm good at it," she said, still shaking her head. "Not because I want it, I know that," I said. That's exactly why I'm doing it." She didn't argue further that day. She cried quietly in the way people do when they've been underestimated their whole working life and suddenly aren't. She asked me twice more over the following weeks if I was certain. Both times I told her the same thing. I had never been more certain of anything since the day I signed my teaching contract at Jefferson Vale, 34 years earlier. The truth came out on April 9th, 5 weeks later, when Vanessa and Mark's financial advisor, the same one who'd apparently been advising them about my situation, pulled county property records while arranging the power of attorney paperwork they'd been quietly preparing without my full participation. I imagine it was a very short, very confusing phone call between that advisor and my daughter, the kind where a professional has to explain twice that the paperwork simply doesn't say what the client assumed it would say. She called me at 4:20 that afternoon. "Dad, the house. The deed. It's under Priya's name. What is this?"
Out!
"It's exactly what it looks like, Vanessa. You gave the house to your nurse?" "I didn't give her anything," I said, keeping my voice level the way I'd kept it in that kitchen 5 weeks earlier while she explained how useless my money was. "I compensated the one person who actually treated me like I mattered while recovering from a stroke you visited twice for. That's not fair, Dad. I have kids, a business to help run. I can't just—" "I'm not asking you to explain your schedule, Vanessa. I'm telling you what I did and why. That house is worth $400,000, Dad. That's what showing up is worth, apparently," I said. "You taught me the going rate yourself 3 weeks after I signed it, telling me my money was useless. I listened to you, Vanessa. I just didn't spend it the way you assumed I would. Can't do this. We'll contest it." But undue influence and capacity. I had a full neurological evaluation before I signed anything. In writing, dated, witnessed entirely unprompted by Priya, who didn't even know until after it was done. "I'd invite you to contest it, but I don't think you'll like what the record shows once a court asks who visited twice in 11 hospital days and who showed up 5 mornings a week for 5 months straight." "Dad, please," she said, and for the first time in months there was something underneath the calculation in her voice, something that might have been real. "Can we actually talk? Not like before?" "We can talk," I said, "but I'm not angry, Vanessa. I want you to hear that clearly because I mean it exactly the way I'm saying it. I'm not punishing you. I'm just done pretending the last 5 months didn't happen the way they happened." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know how to fix this," she finally said, and it was the most honest sentence she'd spoken to me since November. "Neither do I told her. "But it starts with you actually showing up here without an agenda, and it starts today if you mean it." She came by that evening alone, without Mark, without a folder of financial projections. She sat in the same kitchen chair, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, she didn't check her phone once. 6 months have passed since that April phone call. Vanessa visits every other Sunday now on her own initiative. The first few visits were stiff, both of us talking around the actual subject, like it might explode if handled directly. It was Priya oddly who first got a real laugh out of her again over a crossword clue. Neither of them could. Solving something in the room loosened after that in a way words hadn't managed. "It's not repaired, not fully. Some sentences once said out loud at a kitchen table don't fully unsay themselves." Vanessa told me in June that she'd replayed that word useless more times than she could count since April, and that she still didn't fully understand how she'd let herself become someone who could say it to her own father. I told her I didn't fully understand it either, but that I was more interested in who she chose to be from that point forward than in relitigating the sentence itself. "Priya still comes 5 mornings a week, though. These days, half of that time is just coffee and crosswords since my hand is steady enough now to hold the mug on its own. She still occasionally tries to bring up transferring some portion of the house's value back into some kind of shared arrangement with Vanessa's family. I tell her the same thing every time. The deed reflects a decision I made with a clear mind about who showed up when it mattered. It's not up for renegotiation just because the relationship it once threatened has started slowly to heal. The house on Ashford Lane still has my name on the mailbox, and Marion's rose bushes still bloom out front every June, but the deed says Priya Akari, and I've never once regretted the version of practical I chose over the one my daughter offered me across that kitchen table. Some people spend their whole lives keeping score of who deserves what. I spent 71 years believing that math sorted itself out through blood. It took a stroke and one true sentence from my own daughter to teach me it doesn't. It sorts itself out through who actually shows up morning after morning without once mentioning what it's worth. I think sometimes about how close I came to never finding that out at all. If I'd stayed quiet at that kitchen table on March 3rd the way I'd stayed quiet through years of smaller versions of the same sentence brushing off comments about Sunrise Meadows and practical decisions until they became the only language left between us, I don't know what version of this story ends with me still in that house, still holding my own coffee mug, still surrounded by the one person who actually earned the right to be there. I only know the version that actually happened, and I wouldn't trade it, not even for the daughter I'm still slowly, carefully learning how to have again. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw stories about family loyalty and the people who show up when it actually counts. I'll see you in the next one.